Hey, what's going on everybody? Commander Crane here, and we are back with another Pioneer video. And today, we're going to be talking about 10 green-black budget decks for the Pioneer format. So, I don't remember how many videos we've done at this point, but we've done all the different monocolor decks, and we started with Gruul and Selesnya, and we're on our way to Golgari. And I'm very excited to talk about these decks today. I would say I honestly had the easiest time coming up with 10 Golgari decks for Pioneer. I feel like there's a lot of diversity in terms of like different archetypes and different cards that you can play that are viable in the Pioneer format, so it was very, very fun to make this video. As always, like I have to mention this, 10 different decks. If there's any of these decks that you think maybe should have been something else, something a little bit more spicier, definitely let me know what you think in the comments section below after the video. But let's go and hop into the actual video here. So the criteria to be in this, obviously it has to be a true Golgari deck. There can't be any additional splashes. Everything in this and all these decks have to be able to be cast by a green-black dual land. Less than $50. After all, they are budget decks, so that is really, really important. Flavorful theme, it's not necessarily just like, I don't want to say flavorful theme as in like, oh, it's just a bunch of best of these types of cards. Most of the decks have like a very cool theme, whether or not it's like a creature type theme or they have a lot of synergy together. It needs to be fun to play. And then it also needs to be easy for new players. And this is new players as in like, people that are just starting to play the game, or maybe people that are finally starting to explore Pioneer a little bit. And that's not to say that experienced players won't enjoy these decks. It's just that we're not really playing a lot of cards with like word soup on them for the most part. The cards are relatively straightforward as well as very, very powerful. So let's go and hop into the actual list here. So I usually like to start with one of my favorite decks typically, or like a deck that I have a lot of experience with in the past. And when I think of Golgari, I think of Steel Leaf Stompy. It was one of my original Pioneer decks that I really played. It was like the first deck that I took to the Pioneer 1K. It was like the first one, at least in the area that I live, and I managed to get all the way to the top 4 with a deck very, very similar to the one that you're seeing on screen, obviously with some newer cards. But yeah, you turn them sideways. You have your early accelerants like Llanowel's Elvish Mystic. You start getting into your bigger creatures like Steel Leaf Champion and Rotting Regisaur and Questing Beast, and then you polish off the game with some bigger cards like Balustrade Worm, Vivian Arcbow Ranger, and things like that. It's just straight Golgari aggro, very fun, a lot of diverse creatures that normally don't see play in other decks, so I was very, very excited to show this one off. So this next deck is also a Golgari aggro deck, but it is such a popular deck that I've seen so many people build this deck. Like, obviously, it's like a little bit different, but typically people build it the same way, and that is Death Touch Toxic with Finn the Fangbearer. Like, what's really cool about this is, like, okay, you're playing all these cheap Death Touch creatures that just have a lot of value for the most part, but what's really great with this deck is, like, playing Finn the Fangbearer kind of gives you like a different avenue to where like you don't really necessarily care about like regular combat damage. You just care about connecting with the opponent. So like playing a whole bunch of 1 power creatures is totally fine, because if you have Finn the Fangbearer in play, they get 2 poison counters, which is pretty sweet, and you just play a whole bunch of really, really cool Death Touch creatures. The nice thing that's about this deck is it's so cheap to build that I was still able to fit 4 collected companies in the deck. What's also cool with this, we do get a manland that also fits the theme of the deck. Obviously, Hissing Quagmire does turn into a 2/2 Death Touch land, which is kind of cool. But yeah, just Death Touch Toxic. You could cut like Finn the Fangbearer and just go straight all in on the Death Touch, and not have to worry about the poison counters. But it just kind of works out. It fits the theme of the deck overall. So definitely a huge fan of the Death Touch Toxic deck. So the next deck, I would say, is probably one of the more popular decks in the metagame, and this is really our main mid-range deck that I'm sharing here today. That is Demon Midrange. It's basically similar to the Rakdos and the Mono Black versions, but you do get some pretty good cards if you play green, most notably, obviously, Glissa Sunslayer as well as Abrupt Decay, but the core is still the same. You play your demons like Blade of the Oni, Archfiend of the Dross, Unholy Annex, and you play just a bunch of other good mid-range threats like Mosswood Dread Knight, that kind of thing. It's really just, again, your generic, just Golgari mid-range rock deck. Definitely a very, very popular deck to play in the metagame. So, speaking of popular Golgari decks to play in the metagame, people love this deck too. Insidious Roots. It's pretty simple. Basically, you have your card Insidious Roots. Whenever one or more creature cards leave your graveyard, create an 0/1 green plant creature token, then put a +1/+1 counter on each plant you control. So we're playing a whole bunch of cards that we either buy back from our graveyard or like make us be able to get, obviously Insidious Roots triggered, that kind of thing. We have cards that come back from the graveyard that trigger it. We have cards, obviously, like Souls of the Lost that get bigger as the more permanents we have in our graveyard. Really, just this deck is very, very synergistic. I will say, though, the one thing that was really tricky with this deck, there were some cards I had to cut, like Deathrite Shaman. This deck, I really had to make cuts to get it under the $50. I have Necroblossom Snarl representing the lands there, just because I had to play some really, really cheap lands to be able to make this work, just because of a lot of the cards in this deck are not like super pricey, but when you're trying to get it in the $50 range, it was very, very tricky. So this deck, I was just able to get under $50, but rightfully so, it is a very, very powerful deck to play in the metagame. So the next deck we have to talk about is one that I've always loved to talk about. I've built a few of these on the channel just because of how fun and cheap it is to build. That is Graveyard Beans. So we're playing Up the Beanstalk, which is a very strong card in its own right. It's not even that we really want to play Up the Beanstalk in terms of like we're building a deck around it. It's the fact that we're playing all these different cards that trigger Up the Beanstalk, so we might as well just play it. Most notably cards like Hollow Marauder, Huskburster Swarm, and the Diamond Weapon. So obviously they cost less to cast for each creature card or permanent in our graveyard, so we play a whole bunch of cheap creatures that help fill our graveyard, and obviously like Citrus Supply, Gnawing Vermin, Satyr Wayfinder, and Town Greeter, and then we get to take advantage of these, creatures that are pretty big in size, a 4/2 flyer, 6/6 Menace Death Touch, a 8/8 with reach, but we get to play these for very, very few mana, take advantage of Up the Beanstalk. And yeah, what's also really cool with this one is there are no rares in this deck. You could play a card like, what's the Urborg Lurgoyf, Souls of the Lost, but I figured, you want to know what, I'm going to keep this deck just the same as the one that I recently built. No rares at all. Obviously, like, I did include rares for the lands, but you could just play a whole bunch of common lands and not have to play a single rare, which is pretty cool with this deck. So the next one we have to talk about is another very popular Golgari deck that people love to play, and it was another deck similar to the previous one where it was really tough to honestly fit it in the budget. That is Golgari Sacrifice. So obviously there's the known combo with Cauldron Familiar and Yigra, because it turns other creatures into food. So basically if you have like two Cauldron Familiars, you can just keep sacking them, obviously pinging our opponent, and then it comes back, and then you sack the other one, and boom, 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 boom. It goes back and forth. So it's a combo deck, but it's also just kind of a cool mid-range deck to where, you're playing a card like Popular Egotist, for instance, which is basically your mono-black Mayhem Devil. Whenever you sacrifice a permanent, target opponent loses 1 life, and you gain 1 life, which is pretty cool. So you have this very cool combo element with Yigra, but you can also just play Golgari Sacrifice, value, mid-range, and just kind of get there from just playing that, which is honestly really, really cool. And I wanted to make sure I included a Sacrifice deck just because people really, really do like these types of decks, but it was really tricky to honestly fit it in the $50 budget, so I was very happy that I was able to do that. Okay, so our next decks that we have to talk about, I always save the creature type decks for last, which are really fun. This one is sort of a creature type deck. It's not going like super far into the actual tribe itself, but I kind of wanted to include it with that. And obviously, I've been doing a lot of Hardened Scales decks with these mono green decks, or the green decks that I've been doing. So I obviously had to include a Snake Scales deck, which Winding Constrictor is awesome. It's definitely a huge fan favorite from, Standard of a few years ago. People really like this card, but I was able to go into the snake theme a little bit with this, which was pretty cool, with cards like Stonecoil Serpent and Hagra Constrictor, fitting the theme of the deck very, very well, but also, being able to play a few snakes, because there's not a lot of good snakes for the most part in Pioneer, so it's kind of cool that we were able to make that work. But obviously, we have some really other good 1/1 counter synergy cards like Markerback Walker, Nissa Voice of Zendikar, Hardened Scales, Ranger Class when we get it to level 2. Obviously, Drowning Ichor can be really strong if we have a ton of creatures with 1/1 counters. Then we get to Proliferate, which can be pretty cool. So yeah, Snake Scales, really, really cool deck. I love Winding Constrictor, and I love it when they make, like cards that do fit the theme of this. It seems like most of the 1/1 counter theme cards tend to be more Selesnya nowadays than they do Golgari. So it is kind of cool when Golgari does get some black counter shenanigans. It always fits the theme of this deck very, very well. So the next deck I have to talk about, I would say, is arguably the strongest of the bunch. It's a deck that I've played a lot at FNM and honestly done very, very well with. That is Golgari Aggro, the most underrated probably deck, honestly, in this entire video. This deck's absolutely insane. You have Champion of the Perished, which is just a crazy good card. If humans had Champion of the Perished, it would also be absolutely insane, but we only have Champion of the Perished so far, and we get to take advantage of that. But we also are playing a whole bunch of different lords. Well, I say a whole bunch of different lords. We're playing Lord of the Accursed. Like, normally you can play Death Baron, but it doesn't fit the budget for this, so we only get the one lord, but it really doesn't even matter because we get some really strong zombies. Lazotype Reaver works extremely well with Champion of the Parish. Razorlash Transmogrant is just a creature that just does not stay away. It just keeps coming back, and it's really easy to reanimate it. Zul Ashur, any of our zombies that die, guess what? We get to recast those, which is pretty sweet. Then we get cards like Glissa Sunslayer, which is just a really good card in general. There's really not a lot that I could say for the most part that I haven't already said about this. It's just a really, really fun deck to play. I also did realize that I have a little bit of a typo on this. It's supposed to include Collected Company on here. I forgot to put it on the list somehow. So just pretend that there's 4 Collected Companies as well in there, which honestly was really cool that I was able to fit Collected Company in this budget. So yeah, Zombie Aggro, very, very fun to play. And yeah, just this deck is super underrated. You definitely have to give it a try. And our last deck that we have to talk about today. So, well, actually technically second to last, but everyone knew this deck was coming, so let's just get it over with. It's Elf Stompy. I mean, everyone knew there was going to be an Elf deck on here. There's not a lot of black spells. It's really just Shaman of the Pact as well as Gnarlroot Trapper. There's not a lot of good black elves for the most part in Pioneer, so it's really just a green-based deck, but do not underestimate Shaman of the Pact. This card is absolutely incredible. When it enters the battlefield, target opponent loses life equal to the number of elves you control. And yeah, it's kind of insane. We just go super wide with cards like Dwynen's Elite and Elvish Warmaster. We're also just playing 12 lords in our deck, so we go really wide and really tall, which is very unique to elves for the most part, because a lot of creature types can go tall or wide, but they really can't do both. But with the fact that we have so many lords in this deck, it's just super easy to do. And guess what? We also get to fit Collected Company in this version of the deck as well, which is pretty sweet. So yeah, Elf Stompy, definitely very, very fun. And the last deck that we have to talk about today, it's pretty much tradition at this point to always do a dinosaur deck, like if we can fit it in like the video, and that's obviously why we did it. We played Dinosaurs. So what's really cool with this build of Dinosaurs, it's somewhat similar to the Steel Leaf Stompy version. We're playing a card like Riding Regisaur, which is very good with fight rigging. So it has Hideaway 5, and then at the beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Then if you control a creature card with power 7 or greater, you may cast the exiled card without paying its mana cost. So we're playing Pugnacious Hammerskull, Riding Regisaur, and newcomer Regal Imperiosaur, which are just very, very big dinosaurs that we can play for very cheap, so that way we can trigger our fight rigging and cast the card. And guess what? This deck was so cheap, we were able to fit 2 copies of Tyrannax Rex in this deck, which is really, really cool. And then obviously we're playing 3 copies of Big Galta. It's just a really fun deck to play. I love dinosaurs in general, so any excuse to be able to play a dinosaur deck, or at least feature one on the channel here, I'm always going to do that. But yeah, there's just so many different things you can do with Golgari in this format. You can obviously go like super aggro, you can kind of go wide a little bit, you can go with like a big creature type theme, you can go even control if you really want to. There's a lot of different things you can do with Golgari in Pioneer, which I think is definitely very, very cool. And let me know in the comment section below which one of these decks you think is your favorite, or one that you're going to build, or maybe even have one of these decks already built and, you know, maybe yours looks a little bit different than mine. Definitely know what you think in the comment section below. And that's it. Takes us to the end of the video here. Thanks so much for watching. The deck lists are in the description below if you'd like to check them out for yourself. Huge shout out to our channel members, Ralph, Matt, Arcadius, Ray, Gary, Saranoki, Michael D, our premium channel member, The Common Cold, Jeremy P, and BG Stilts. If you're interested in being a channel member, it starts at $1 a month, and you get access to the exclusive Commander Crane Discord, as well as other features here on the channel. So, I'm Commander Crane, thanks for watching this video, and I hope to catch you in the next one.